Han Do-yun had never felt smaller in his life. He stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, a massive circular hall carved from pale stone that glowed with a soft blue light. Around him, rising in tiers like a stadium, sat the representatives of 42 alien species. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no faces at all, just smooth plates of bone above wide, judging eyes. Every single one of them was looking down at him. He was here to ask for a trade seat, nothing more. Humanity had developed faster than light travel only 9 years ago, and since then they had done everything right. They followed the protocols, they respected the borders, and now, after years of waiting, Earth had sent its supreme commander to make a simple, reasonable request. The High Arbiter, a tall being named Olen, with silver skin and 4 arms folded neatly behind his back, tilted his head and spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber like wind through a canyon. "You wish to trade among the elder races," Olen said slowly, as though tasting something unpleasant. "Your species has existed for less than a breath of galactic time. You have no meaningful technology, no cultural contribution, no legacy." He paused. "What exactly do you offer?" Do-hyun kept his expression calm. He had practiced this. He had rehearsed every word, every gesture. He spoke clearly about Earth's resources, its manufacturing ability, its workforce. He listed numbers, projections, and proposed agreements. No one listened. A Varath general near the top of the chamber let out a low rumble that passed for laughter among his kind. He was massive, covered in dark green scales, with a jaw built for crushing bone. He whispered something to the delegate beside him, and they both looked at Do-hyun the way a person might look at a dog that had wandered into a meeting room. The council voted. The request was denied, not with anger, not with debate, just a quiet wave of disinterest, as if humanity had asked for something slightly embarrassing. Do-hyun left the chamber with his jaw tight and his hands still. His aide, a young officer named Kwon Tae-ho, was waiting outside. "How did it go?" Tae-ho asked. Do-hyun said nothing. He just kept walking. Back on Earth, in the basement levels of the Seoul Intelligence Center, a woman named Shin Eun-ji sat in front of 6 screens, each one displaying streams of intercepted alien communication. Most of it was routine: cargo schedules, trade permits, diplomatic chatter. But 3 days before Do-hyun's visit to the council, there was a spike in encrypted Varath military traffic. Eun-ji had flagged it immediately. She sent a coded message to Do-hyun aboard the station. It read, "Something is moving. Cannot confirm. Recommend delay." Do-hyun received the message too late. On a Tuesday morning, without any warning, without any declaration of war, the sky above Earth changed color. It turned white, then orange, then a terrible burning red. The Varath Dominion's fleet had arrived in orbit, 200 warships arranged in a perfect grid, and they began firing. The first strikes hit Seoul, Tokyo, Mumbai, Berlin, and Sao Paulo. Massive beams of energy fell from the sky like the fingers of a god pressing down on the earth. Buildings did not collapse. They evaporated. Streets turned to rivers of molten glass. The sound was beyond anything human ears were built to understand. It was not an explosion. It was an erasure. In Busan, a young combat medic named Bae Jun-woo was on his second cup of coffee when the ground shook so hard it threw him off his chair. He stumbled outside and saw the horizon glowing in a way that made no sense. It was morning, but the light was coming from the wrong direction. Then the wounded started arriving. They came on foot, in cars, on stretchers made from doors and curtains. Jun-woo worked without stopping. He bandaged burns that went down to the bone. He held the hands of people who could not scream anymore because their lungs were full of ash. He carried a girl no older than 6 out of a collapsed school and set her down on the grass. And when he checked her pulse, There was nothing there. He kept working. There was nothing else to do. In 12 hours, over 9 million people were dead. Entire cities were gone. Earth's orbital defense grid, still only half built, was destroyed in the first 3 minutes. The few military satellites that survived sent back footage of the Varath fleet sitting calmly in orbit, patient and unmoving, like hunters waiting for a wounded animal to stop breathing. Then the message came. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every human language, projected onto the sky itself by Varath drones hovering in the upper atmosphere. The Galactic Council has authorized corrective action against the species known as humanity. Earth will accept stewardship and disarm all military forces immediately. Failure to comply will result in total pacification. The word pacification was chosen carefully. In the Council's language, it meant the complete destruction of a species' ability to resist. It had been used before, on other young civilizations. None of them had survived it. In the ruins of the Sol Command Bunker, deep underground, Han Do-hyun stood before a cracked table, surrounded by generals, scientists, and officers covered in dust. Power was running on backup. Half the communication lines were dead. The air smelled like smoke and burning plastic. Someone asked, "Do we respond to their terms?" Do-hyun looked up. His face was lit by the glow of fires still burning on the surface above them. His eyes were steady and very, very cold. "Yes," he said quietly, "we respond." He placed both hands on the table. "They came to our home. They burned our cities. They killed our children, and they expect us to kneel." He paused and looked around the room at every face. "They do not understand what they have done. They do not understand what we are." He straightened his back. "Send no reply to the Council. Go dark on all channels, and get me Yun-Nari." No one in that room argued. No one hesitated. Something had changed in all of them, something deep and permanent. Fear was still there. Yes, grief was everywhere. But now there was something else, something stronger. But underneath it, rising like a tide, was something the Galactic Council had never accounted for in any of their projections or risk models. Rage. Pure, patient, human rage. And it was just getting started. 6 months after the bombardment, the surface of Earth looked like a wound that refused to heal. Where cities once stood, there were only fields of black glass and ash that the wind carried for hundreds of kilometers. Rivers had changed course. Coastlines had shifted. The sky, thick with dust, had turned a permanent shade of gray. But underneath the surface, humanity was alive, and it was angry. Within weeks of the attack, people had moved underground. Old subway tunnels became highways. Abandoned mines became neighborhoods. Military bunkers that had been built decades ago for wars that never came were finally being used. Beneath mountains, under oceans, inside hollowed-out rock formations deep below the earth, the human race reorganized itself with a speed and discipline that surprised even its own leaders. Han Do-hyun did not sleep more than 3 hours a night. He moved between underground command centers, speaking to generals, engineers, factory leaders, and scientists. He signed the order that created the United Earth Defense Force, merging every nation's military into a single unified command. There were no arguments, no political debates. No one asked about borders or flags. The bombardment had burned all of that away. "We are one people now," Do-hyun said in his first address to the surviving population, broadcast through underground relay stations. "Not because we chose it, but because they left us no other choice." The first person he called after the bombardment was Yun-Nari. Nari was a physicist. Before the attack, she had worked at a small research university studying gravitational wave theory. She was quiet, serious, and had a habit of solving problems in her head while other people were still reading the question. When the call came, she was living in a refugee shelter in Daejeon, helping repair water filtration systems with whatever parts she could find. "I need you to build something," Do-hyun told her, "something that will make them afraid." She was taken to a facility beneath Mount Hala on Jeju Island, a massive underground complex that had been constructed in secret during the first years of Earth's contact with the galaxy. Inside were laboratories, fabrication rooms, and a team of 400 scientists and engineers pulled from every surviving institution on the planet. The project was called Blackthorn. Nari studied the wreckage of Verath weapons that had been recovered from crash sites and failed munitions. The alien technology was advanced, but it was also old. It had not changed in centuries. The Verath had no reason to innovate. They had never faced a real enemy. Their weapons worked by brute force, overwhelming energy, simple destruction. Nari took a different approach. She focused on gravity, not as a theory, but as a weapon. If she could generate a focused gravitational field strong enough to collapse the internal structure of a starship, the armor would not matter. The shields would not matter. The ship would tear itself apart from the inside. She called it the Gravity Lance. It took 3 months of failures. Power cells exploded. Prototypes melted. 2 engineers were hospitalized after a test chamber cracked and flooded with radiation. Nari barely ate. She wrote equations on the walls when she ran out of paper. Her team thought she was losing her mind, but they followed her anyway, because she was always right. On the 91st day, they ran the final test. A small drone, armored with salvaged Verath plating, was placed at the far end of the sealed tunnel. Nari entered the firing command herself. The lance fired. There was no flash, no beam. Just a low hum that vibrated in the bones of everyone watching, followed by a sound like a car being crushed in a machine. The drone folded inward, not exploding, not shattering, but compressing, as if an invisible hand had squeezed it into a ball the size of a fist. The room was silent. Nari stared at the data on her screen for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "It works." While Nari built weapons, Shin Unji built something just as dangerous, a web of lies and eyes that stretched across the galaxy. Unji understood something that most military leaders did not. The aliens did not take humans seriously. To the elder species, humans were primitives, useful for manual labor perhaps, but not worth watching. And that was the greatest advantage Earth had ever been given. She sent teams of trained operatives to alien space stations and trade hubs, disguised as refugees, servants, and laborers. The aliens welcomed them. Cheap workers, they thought. Obedient. Harmless. Every single one of them was a spy. Within 4 months, Unji had agents on over 30 alien stations. They mapped Verath patrol routes, copied communication codes, recorded fleet positions, and identified political tensions within the Council. They sent everything back to Earth through a network of hidden relay devices no larger than a coin. The Verath never suspected a thing. Humans were beneath suspicion. That was the point. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbit, Captain Kwon Tae-ho was making a name for himself, though not the kind the Verath expected. Tae-ho had survived the bombardment by sheer luck. His patrol shuttle had been on the far side of the moon during the attack. When he returned, the orbital defense grid was gone, and the Verath had established a loose blockade around the planet. With a small group of pilots flying retrofitted civilian shuttles, Tae-ho launched hit-and-run attacks on Verath patrol ships. The damage was minor. A sensor dish destroyed here, a fuel line ruptured there. The Verath called them pests. Insects. They did not bother hunting them down. But Tae-ho was not trying to win. He was testing. Every raid was a controlled experiment. New engine modifications, new maneuvering patterns, new ways to confuse Verath targeting systems. He recorded everything, and sent the data back to the engineers underground. He was building a playbook for a war that had not started yet. Far away, in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council, High Arbiter Olen addressed the assembly with satisfaction. Reports from the Verath confirmed that Earth's military was destroyed. There were scattered pockets of resistance, yes, but nothing meaningful. Humanity would accept terms within the year. It always went this way with younger species. The matter of Earth is resolved. We may turn our attention to more pressing concerns. Several junior species in the back rows exchanged uneasy glances. They had watched the bombardment footage. They had seen what the Council was willing to do. And now, quietly, they were wondering the same thing. What if the humans did not give up? Deep beneath Jeju Island, Yoon Nari sat alone in her lab, staring at the schematics for a ship-mounted version of the Gravity Lance. It would take another 6 months to build. Maybe more. She did not care how long it took. She pinned a photograph to the wall above her desk. It showed a street in Incheon, her street, before the bombardment. There were trees, a bakery on the corner, a crosswalk where she used to wait every morning. The photograph was the only thing that remained of that street. Everything else was glass and silence. She picked up her pen and went back to work. 14 months after the bombardment, the Verath Dominion's fuel depot at Station Kyra 7 exploded without warning. It was a massive structure, floating in the dark between 2 star systems, storing enough fuel to power a battle fleet for 6 months. One moment, it was there. The next, it was a cloud of fire and spinning metal expanding silently into the void. The Verath investigated. They found nothing. No enemy ships, no missiles, no sabotage devices. Just a single maintenance worker's badge, left floating in the wreckage, belonging to a human laborer, who had been assigned to clean the lower decks. 3 days later, a Verath communication relay in the outer ring went dark. Then another. Then 5 more in a single night. Fleet commanders tried to contact each other and received only static. Patrol ships were rerouted to investigate, but their navigation systems had been quietly corrupted, and half of them ended up in the wrong star system entirely. Operation Ghost Tide had begun. Han Do-hyun sat in his underground command center beneath the mountains of Gangwon Province, watching the reports come in on a wall of glowing screens. Each light that went out on the map represented a Verath asset destroyed or disabled. He did not smile, but there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a focus, that his officers had learned to recognize as satisfaction. This was not a traditional counterattack. There was no fleet, no front line, no declaration. Instead, it was 100 small cuts delivered simultaneously across a dozen star systems, so coordinated and so precise that the Verath could not tell where it was coming from. Shin Unji had spent months preparing this. Her network of human spies, scattered across alien stations and outposts, had mapped every weakness in the Verath supply chain. She knew which fuel lines were unguarded. She knew which relay stations had outdated security. She knew which Verath officers were lazy, which ones were corrupt, and which ones could be fed false information without suspecting a thing. She activated them all at once. On a trade station near the Verath border, a human janitor plugged a device the size of a thumbnail into a wall terminal and walked away. Within an hour, the station's entire logistics database was copied and replaced with corrupted data. Supply orders were rerouted to nowhere. Cargo ships arrived at empty docks. Repair parts went to the wrong fleets. On another station, a human cook working in a Verath officer's mess quietly recorded every conversation at the senior table for 3 months. The recordings revealed the patrol schedules for the entire western sector. That information was sent to Kwon Taeho. Taeho was no longer flying retrofitted shuttles. In a hidden shipyard built inside an asteroid belt, The UEDF had constructed a small fleet of fast attack ships, sleek, dark, and equipped with a new technology that Taeho had helped develop: micro-FTL jumping. A ship could enter faster than light travel for less than 2 seconds, covering just a few thousand kilometers, enough to appear behind an enemy, fire, and vanish before their weapons could lock on. Taeho led 12 ships. He called them the Wolf Pack. They hit their first target, a Verath convoy carrying weapons to a forward base at the edge of the Helos corridor. The convoy had 16 ships and an armed escort. Taeho's 12 appeared out of nothing, fired a concentrated volley that crippled the lead escort vessel, and disappeared. 30 seconds later, the Wolf Pack appeared again from a completely different angle, destroyed 2 cargo ships, and vanished once more. The attack lasted 4 minutes. The Verath lost 6 ships. Taeho lost none. The Verath Fleet Command sent a report to the Galactic Council. Unknown human attack craft with an unidentified drive system were operating deep inside Verath territory. They requested reinforcements. The Council's response was slow and confused. High Arbiter Olen read the report and set it aside. Remnants, he said. Desperate acts by a broken species. Increased patrols. But the patrols found nothing. The Wolf Pack moved like smoke. They struck fuel convoys, sensor outposts, troop transports, and communication hubs. They never attacked the same way twice. Verath crews began reporting strange contacts on their sensors. Ghost signatures that appeared and disappeared, always just out of range. Morale among the Verath fleet dropped. Soldiers who had once laughed at humans were now checking their scanners every few minutes and sleeping with their weapons close. They started calling the human ships the Ghosts. On a captured Verath cruiser drifting in the debris field of a destroyed convoy, Bae Junwoo stepped through the airlock for the first time. He was not supposed to be there. He was a medic, not a soldier. But the boarding team needed every hand, and Junwoo had volunteered. The ship was dark. Emergency lights cast long red shadows down the corridors. Junwoo moved with his squad, his medical kit on his back, and a sidearm he had never fired in his hand. They found the crew, 12 Verath soldiers, huddled in the engine room. Their weapons were on the floor. Their hands were raised. Junwoo had expected anger. He had expected defiance. What he saw instead was fear. Real, deep, unmistakable fear. These soldiers, each one twice his size, with armor-plated skin and claws that could tear through metal, were afraid of him. A 24-year-old medic from Busan, with shaking hands and dust on his boots. One of the Verath soldiers looked at Junwoo and spoke in broken standard, the common galactic language. "You were supposed to surrender," the soldier said. "Why did you not surrender?" Junwoo did not answer. He did not know what to say. Later, sitting alone in the shuttle on the way back to Earth's hidden fleet, he thought about that question for a long time. He thought about the girl he had carried out of the school in Busan. He thought about the fires. He thought about the sound the sky had made when the beams came down. He understood now why the Verath were afraid. It was because humans had already lost everything, and people with nothing left to lose do not fight the way the galaxy expected. Back in the command center, Eunji brought Do-hyun a new piece of intelligence. Her spies had obtained the location of the Verath Dominion's most guarded secret, the Iron Veil, a fortress star system where their most powerful fleet, the Throne Armada, was stationed. It was the heart of the Verath military. No species had ever attacked it. Most did not even know where it was. Do-hyun studied the star charts for 3 days without speaking to anyone. He ate at his desk. He slept in his chair. He ran simulations on a battered computer that crashed twice a day. On the 4th day, he called a meeting with his senior commanders. Taeho was there, still wearing his flight suit. Nari attended by secure video from Jeju Island. Eunji stood in the back, arms crossed, watching everything. Do-hyun put the star map on the table. The Iron Veil glowed at its center, a red dot surrounded by rings of defenses and 1,000 warships. "This is where we go next," he said. Taeho leaned forward. "That is their strongest position. We would be outnumbered 4-1, maybe more." Do-hyun nodded. "Yes. So what is the plan?" Taeho asked. Do-hyun looked around the room. "We do not just hurt them," he said. "We break the sword they hold over every species in this galaxy. We take the one thing they believe no one can take." He tapped the red dot. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Iron Veil, like a fist punching through a wall of silence. 312 human warships, built in secret inside asteroid fields and underground lunar docks, appeared on the Verath scanners all at once. For 7 full seconds, not a single Verath officer in the entire system moved or spoke. They simply stared at their screens, trying to understand what they were seeing. Humans did not have a fleet. That was a fact. The Council had confirmed it. Earth's military had been destroyed in the bombardment. This was known. This was certain. And yet, here they were. Kwon Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the UEDF flagship Harang, a ship built from salvaged alien alloys and human engineering, painted black and shaped like a blade. Around him, his crew moved with calm, rehearsed precision. They had trained for this in simulations for months, running the same battle plan over and over until every person on every ship could do their job in their sleep. Taeho opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Harang Actual. Operation Falling Star is active. You know your assignments. You know what we came here to do." He paused. "Make them remember us." The Verath Throne Armada responded within minutes. Over 1,000 warships, dreadnoughts, cruisers, carriers, and gunships moved into formation around the Iron Veil's central fortress. They outnumbered the humans more than 3-1. Their ships were larger, heavier, and better armed. Their fleet admiral, a decorated Verath commander, ordered a standard encirclement. He had fought dozens of battles against lesser species. This would be no different. He was wrong. The human fleet did not behave like any enemy the Verath had ever faced. Instead of forming a wall and exchanging fire, the UEDF ships split into dozens of small groups and began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense to the Verath computers. Groups would charge forward, then scatter. Ships would appear to retreat and loop back from unexpected angles. Taeho's Wolfpack, now expanded to 30 ships, used micro-FTL jumps to appear inside the Verath formation itself, fire at point-blank range, and vanish before the enemy could return a single shot. The Verath targeting systems, designed to track predictable fleet movements, could not keep up. Their guns fired at empty space. Their missiles chased ghost signatures. Their formation, built on centuries of unchanged military doctrine, began to crack. Then, the gravity lances fired. Yoon Nari was aboard the support carrier Baekdu, positioned behind the main battle line. She sat in a sealed operations room, surrounded by screens and holographic displays. Her hands moving across a control panel that connected her to 24 gravity lance platforms mounted on specialized warships throughout the fleet. Each one had been built by her team, tested by her team, and calibrated by her personally. She selected the first target, a Verath dreadnought, one of the largest ships in their fleet, bristling with weapons and heavy armor. "Lance 1, fire," she said. There was no beam, no flash of light. The lance generated a focused gravitational distortion that reached across the void and gripped the dreadnought's internal structure. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship shuddered. Its hull buckled inward along its center line, metal screaming as it folded. The dreadnought collapsed on itself like a building in an earthquake, compressing into a twisted wreck in under 4 seconds. Every Verath ship in visual range saw it happen. "Lance 2, fire," Nari said. A second dreadnought crumpled. "Lance 3, a heavy cruiser folded in half. Panic spread through the Vareth fleet like a disease. They had no defense against this. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, not gravitational forces that came from inside their own hulls. Captains broke formation, trying to put distance between themselves and the human fleet. But the wolf pack was already among them, and the lances could reach targets across the entire battlefield. The battle became chaos. Tejo pushed the Harang into the heart of the fighting. His ship twisted through a storm of weapons fire, its adaptive armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed it minutes ago, and redistributing the energy across its hull. He fired on a Varath carrier at close range, crippling its launch bays, then jumped behind a cruiser and destroyed its engines before it could turn. "Harang, you are taking heavy fire. Recommend you pull back," his tactical officer said. "Negative," Tejo replied. "If we pull back, they regroup. Keep pushing." Aboard a troop transport near the rear of the human fleet, Bei Junwu worked in a medical bay that was never designed for this kind of battle. Wounded were arriving faster than he could treat them. Burns, shrapnel, decompression injuries. A young pilot was brought in with half her flight suit melted to her skin. A gunner had lost his arm below the elbow. Junwu moved between them without stopping, his hands steady, even as the ship shook from near-miss explosions. Then a direct hit struck the transport's lower deck. The floor buckled, the lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. The artificial gravity failed, and Junwu found himself floating in a cloud of medical supplies, blood, and debris. He grabbed the edge of a surgical table and pulled himself to his nearest patient, the pilot with the burns. She was unconscious and drifting. Junwu held her with one arm and used the other to seal her wounds with a medical adhesive applicator, working in zero gravity, in the dark, while the ship broke apart around him. He saved her. He saved 11 others before the backup gravity came online and the ship stabilized. In the center of the battlefield, the Varath fleet admiral ordered a full retreat to the Iron Veil fortress. He planned to regroup behind its orbital defenses and counterattack. But when his ships tried to coordinate the withdrawal, their communication network collapsed. Every channel filled with noise. Ships turned the wrong way, collided, or stopped dead in confusion. Shinunji, sitting in her intelligence center back on Earth, allowed herself a small, rare smile. The virus she had planted in the Varath flagship's command system 3 months ago, delivered by a human spy who had worked as a cleaning technician on the ship, had just activated. It did not destroy anything. It simply made every piece of information the Varath fleet shared with itself unreliable. Coordinates were wrong by just enough to matter. Timing was off by just enough to cause collisions. Friend or foe tags flickered. The Throne Armada, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, was fighting itself. Tejo saw the opening. He ordered the Harang forward, leading a spearhead of 40 ships directly through the center of the Varath formation. It was reckless, but the enemy was confused, scattered, and afraid. And Tejo knew from every raid he had ever flown that the moment you stopped pushing was the moment you lost. The Harang took hit after hit. Armor plates shattered. 2 decks were breached. A fire broke out in the engine room and was sealed by emergency bulkheads. Tejo felt blood running down the side of his face from a cut he did not remember getting, but he did not leave his chair. "All lances, focus fire on the Vareth flagship," Nari ordered from the Baekdu. 8 gravity lances fired simultaneously. The Vareth flagship, a massive vessel nearly 2 kilometers long, groaned like a living thing. Its center buckled. Its hull split open along 3 fracture lines, spilling fire and atmosphere into space. It broke apart slowly, almost gracefully, and then it was gone. The Throne Armada shattered. Ships fled in every direction, leaderless and broken. Some surrendered. Some drifted, powerless. The Iron Veil's orbital fortress, without a fleet to protect it, went dark and silent. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Verath lost over 700 ships. The UEDF lost 89. Every single one of those losses was felt. Tejo sat in the shattered bridge of the Haran, his ship crippled and drifting, half its crew injured. He looked out through the cracked viewport at the burning remains of the fortress that no species had ever dared to challenge. He wiped the blood from his eyes, leaned back in his chair, and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 14 months. Across the galaxy, every species with a communication receiver watched the footage in silence. The Verath's Iron Veil, their symbol of absolute unchallengeable power, was burning. And the ones who had burned it were the species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive. The Galactic Council chamber had not been this full in over a century. Every seat was taken. Representatives from all 42 member species sat in their tiered rows, and behind them, in the observation galleries that were usually empty, stood delegates from dozens of non-member species who had come to watch. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, the way it does before a storm that everyone can see coming but no one can stop. 3 months had passed since the Battle of the Iron Veil. In that time, the Verath Dominion had collapsed like a building with its foundations removed. Their military was broken. Their empire, built on fear and the threat of their throne armada, had nothing left to threaten with. Subjugated species across Verath territory rose up in revolt, one after another, tearing down Verath outposts and declaring independence. The Verath government, desperate and humiliated, sent a formal request for peace to Earth. Han Do-hyun did not reply for 2 weeks. When he finally did, his message was 3 words: "We will come." Now he walked into the council chamber through the same doors he had entered 2 years ago as a petitioner, wearing a simple dark uniform with no medals and no decoration. Behind him walked Kwan Tejo, Yun Nari, and Shin Unji, along with a small guard of UEDF officers. Their boots echoed on the stone floor. No one in the chamber spoke. Do-hyun stopped in the center of the room, in the exact spot where he had once stood and asked for a train seat. He looked up at the tiers of alien faces watching him, and said nothing for a long time. The silence was heavy enough to feel. High Arbiter Olin sat in his elevated chair at the top of the chamber. He had prepared a speech, generous terms, a council seat for humanity, reparations, territorial concessions. He had practiced it. He had consulted with advisors. He believed it would be enough. He began to speak. The Council recognizes the representative of Earth and extends its welcome. In light of recent events, we are prepared to offer. I did not come here to listen to your offers, Do-hyun said. His voice was not loud. He did not shout, but it carried through the chamber with a weight that made Olin stop mid-sentence. Do-hyun raised his hand, and one of his officers activated a display. The same grand holographic screen that filled the center of the chamber, the same screen that every species in the room had used for presentations and announcements for thousands of years. Images appeared. Not charts, not maps, not military footage, photographs of people. A street in Seoul before and after. A school in Mumbai, its walls standing in the first image, gone in the second. A hospital in Berlin, where 600 patients had been killed in their beds. A neighborhood in Busan, where Bae Junwoo had carried a 6-year-old girl out of the rubble and found no pulse. Do-hyun narrated each image in a calm, steady voice. He gave numbers. 9.3 million dead in the first 12 hours. 14 million more in the weeks that followed, from radiation, starvation, and injuries that could not be treated, because every hospital within 100 kilometers had been turned to ash. 240 million displaced, entire cultures erased, languages lost because every person who spoke them was gone. The chamber was completely silent. Several representatives from younger species had turned away from the screen. A delegate from a small avian species near the back was visibly trembling. "You called it corrective action," Do-hyun said, his eyes on Olen. "Your records describe it as a routine disciplinary measure. Item 14 on your agenda that day." He let that sit for a moment. We were item 14. Olen opened his mouth to respond, but Do-hyun continued before he could. "I did not come here to take a seat at your table. I did not come here to join your council. I came here to tell you that the age of your authority over younger species is finished." He announced the formation of the Terran Accord, a new alliance, separate from the council, open to any species that wished to join. It would operate on principles of mutual defense, equal representation, and a single unbreakable rule. No member species would ever be subjected to the kind of violence that Earth had suffered. Before Do-hyun had even finished speaking, 3 junior species in the chamber stood and declared their intention to join. By the end of the hour, 11 more had followed. Then Yoon Nari stepped forward. She wore a lab coat over her uniform, and her hair was pulled back in the same practical style she had worn every day for the past 2 years. She looked tired. She always looked tired. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and precise. She explained in simple terms that over the past 14 months, Earth had deployed dormant gravity-lance satellites across dozens of star systems. They were hidden in asteroid fields, in the rings of gas giants, in the debris clouds of dead stars. Each one was connected to a network that monitored Earth in real time. If any species launched an attack on Earth or its allies, the satellites would activate automatically. "This is not a threat," Nari said. "This is a fact. The system is already in place. It cannot be negotiated away. It cannot be disarmed by anyone but us. And we have no intention of disarming it." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted. Olen demanded that this was a violation of galactic law. Nari looked at him with an expression that was almost pity, and said, "You burned our cities and called it law. We built a shield, and you call it a violation. You may think about that." Shin Eun-ji delivered the final blow. She had not spoken during the meeting. She did not need to. Instead, she authorized the release of thousands of classified intelligence files, documents that her spy network had collected over the past year and a half. They showed everything. Backroom deals between council elder species to divide the resources of younger civilizations. Secret votes to authorize military action against species that ask too many questions. Communications between Olen and the Verath High Command, discussing Earth's bombardment as a useful demonstration to discourage other young species from seeking independence. The files spread across the Galactic communication network within hours. The political fallout was immediate and devastating. 3 elder species withdrew from the council before the day was over. 2 more announced internal investigations. Olen's own government recalled him for questioning. The council, as it had existed for millennia, did not collapse that day. But something in it broke, a crack that would never be repaired. Far from the council chamber, far from politics and speeches, Bae Junwoo stood in front of a wall. It was a long wall, built into the side of a hill on the outskirts of what had once been Busan. It was made of white stone, smooth and clean, and it was covered from end to end with names. Millions of names, carved small and close together, running in rows that seemed to go on forever. Junwoo had looked for specific names and found them. His neighbors, his university classmate, the girl from the school. Her name was Park So-eun, and she had been 6 years old. He placed a single white flower at the base of the wall and stood there for a long time, his hands at his sides, saying nothing. The wind moved through the grass around him. The sky was still gray. It would be gray for years. But through a thin break in the clouds, a sliver of pale blue was visible. He did not cry. He had done all his crying months ago. He just stood and breathed, and let the silence hold the weight that words could not. In orbit above Earth, Quan Tejo walked through the corridors of the Haran II, a new ship, bigger and faster than the original, built from everything humanity had learned in the war. His crew saluted him as he passed. He nodded to each one. He knew all their names. The stars stretched out before him, the same stars that the Verath had once claimed as their own, the same stars that the Council had told humanity it had no right to reach for. Tejo did not look at them with anger. The anger had done its job. It had kept them alive. It had kept them fighting. But it was not what would carry them forward. What came next required something else, something steadier, something quieter. Vigilance, patience, and the memory of what it cost. In the empty Galactic Council chamber, after every delegate had gone and the lights had dimmed to their lowest setting, High Arbiter Olen sat alone. The holographic star map still floated in the center of the room, slowly rotating. Earth was there, a small blue dot near the edge of one spiral arm, glowing with a faint, steady light. He stared at it for a very long time. "We should not have touched them," he said to the empty room. No one answered. On Earth, in a city that was still more ruin than skyline, Han Do-hyun stood on a balcony above the rebuilding streets of Seoul. Below him, construction crews worked under floodlights. Cranes swung steel beams into place. Somewhere, someone was playing music, a soft melody carried on the wind from a radio in a worker's tent. Do-hyun closed his eyes. He listened to the sounds of hammers and engines and human voices calling to each other in the dark. The sounds of a species that had been knocked to its knees, that had bled and burned and buried its dead, and then had stood back up. He breathed in, he breathed out, and for the first time in 2 years, the weight on his chest felt just a little bit lighter.